do you really take it seriously that Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus was born of a virgin, and that's part of Christianity?
Like you, I did mock faith in general, and probably Christianity in particular, but I don't do that anymore. And again, that is where the humility comes into it.
When the vicar is saying that Jesus is the Son of God literally, not figuratively, how do you square that with your highly trained rational mind?
This is all obvious nonsense. This is all theological bullshit.
I find that Christianity is actually obsessed with love.
It is a scientific hypothesis that there is a supernatural creator, and I don't see how you can get to that from feelings of personal comfort or feelings of political necessity. You have to get to that from thinking.
If you say, well, it's useless, let's mock it, let's cast it aside, what emerges is a generation of young people growing up who haven't been provided with their Christian or their Judeo-Christian moral framework, and they also for some reason haven't been given what you are saying you're offering now, which is a moral humanism, or I haven't seen any kind of organized, in the way religions are organized, temples of reason and people dedicated to delivering a message of morality to young people.
God couldn't think of a better way to forgive the sins of humanity than to have his son crucified. That is a disgusting idea.
God gave us free will.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for those people who are not familiar, has had an extraordinary life story. She was born and raised in Somalia, at which point she was an enthusiastic member of the Muslim Brotherhood. She then escaped and became a refugee into the Netherlands, where she rose to become a top-ranking politician and a best-selling author. Her book, Infidel, has sold many, many millions of copies over the decades. And during that time and in the years since, she became synonymous with the new atheism movement. She renounced her Islamic past. And if you actually look up new atheism, there are the four horsemen, as they are known, and then straight after that is Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So she has been absolutely integral to that movement. Last autumn, some months ago, on Unheard, in fact, she announced that she had become a Christian. And the world reacted. It was covered in all of the newspapers, and it was seen rightly as an incredibly significant story in the world of ideas. Richard Dawkins, who needs no further introduction, but is perhaps the most famous atheist in the world. His books, The God Delusion, The Selfish Gene, are some of the biggest-selling non-fiction books of all time. He has been active making the argument for the atheistic cause for decades. And when his close friend and fellow new atheist announced that she had become a Christian, he wrote an open letter to her saying, and I quote, "Seriously, Ayaan? You, a Christian? You are no more a Christian than I am." We're bringing them together for the first time to have that out and have that conversation. So please, to begin with, welcome to the stage, Richard Dawkins. Have a seat, Richard. And just behind that curtain, I hope, is none other than Ayaan. Welcome, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Have a seat. Great to see you, Ayan. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think we have to start with the extraordinary few months you've just had. For those people who haven't been following it, just tell us the story how such a famous atheist, someone who had rejected religion, came to call herself a Christian.
So I want to say that I didn't, like many people who come to faith, I didn't see big banging lights, and I didn't have any of those spectacular experiences that some people share. I wish I did, but I didn't. I had a personal crisis. I lived for about a decade with intense depression and anxiety, self-loathing. I hit rock bottom. I went to a place where I actually didn't want to live anymore, but wasn't brave enough to take my own life. And so I was self-medicating. I had, over a long period of time, seen psychiatrists, other doctors. I was trying to understand my condition and trying to treat it with the help of pure evidence-based science. And in January, February of last year, I saw one therapist who said, perhaps it's something else that you have, and she described it as spiritual bankruptcy. And that resonated with me, and having reached a place where I had absolutely nothing to lose, I prayed, and I prayed desperately. And for me, that was a turning point. And what happened after that is a miracle in its own right. I feel connected to something higher and greater than myself. I feel my zest for life is back. And that and that experience has filled me with humility, I have to say. And it is something that's very subjective. It's extremely difficult to explain. I'm trying to work, get into the details, the granular details of how I got there in a book, but that is a short, that's, the shortest story that I can tell. And I'm
Let's go to Richard Dawkins' reaction, because
that's a moving personal story, but to call yourself a Christian is a bit different. I mean, a Christian has to believe in something. And, you go to church now, and you listen to the vicar, and do you kind of notice what a lot of nonsense he talks? I mean, do you really take it seriously that Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus was born of a virgin, and that's part of Christianity?
So I think because you, and I know you very well, we've been friends for a long time, and in fact, in some ways, I think of you as a mentor. I would say you're coming at this from a place of there is nothing. And what has happened to me is I think I have accepted there is something. And when you accept that there is something and there is a powerful entity, for me, the God that turned me around, I think what the vicar is saying no longer sounds nonsensical. It makes a great deal of sense. And not only does it make a great deal of sense, it's also layered with the wisdom of millennia. And so, like you, I did mock faith in general, and probably Christianity in particular, but I don't do that anymore. And again, that is where the humility comes into it, is it doesn't seem, in 2024, after I went through that experience, it doesn't seem nonsensical to me, and I don't mock it. I think I've come down to my knees to say, perhaps those people who've always had faith have something that we who lost faith don't have. And people who have faith also, like the woman who told me, well, you've tried everything and you've lost hope, you've lost faith. Try it, pray. I think just in that one word, there is so much wisdom and that it's. I am stuttering and I'm staggering to say. I'm just trying to say no. It's not stupid. Okay. It's in fact it's clever and it's wise.
So you believe in some kind of higher power, which is comforting you. And you're obviously reacting from an Islamic past, and I know that from what you've written, that part of what you feel is that Christianity is a bulwark against Islam, which is a quite separate thing from what you've been now saying, but you stand by that. I mean, that's part of what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I accept that, and I support that. That's why I've called you a political Christian. But from what you've just said, it sounds as though you're more than just a political Christian. I mean, it sounds as though you actually believe it.
So what is your response to those specific questions of Richard? When the vicar is saying that Jesus is the Son of God literally, not figuratively, how do you square that with your highly trained rational mind?
Well, it is, again, different planes of perception. So I choose to accept Jesus Christ, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the story of Jesus Christ. I choose to accept that. So on the personal level, the rewards I get, very subjective again, but mine and through choice, which is separate from where I think that, aside from my personal experience, the history of Western civilization is mainly Christian, and that the external forces, for instance, the spread of Islam, non-violently or violently, and the challenge of Islam and the message of Islam to Western civilization can be countered and should be countered with the message of Western civilization, which is essentially Christian. And in that sense, I think there are more people who agree with me, but that is on the societal level. And then on the civilizational level, I think that every moral, you've used yourself, Richard, the phrase lately that there is moral Christianity and there is cultural Christianity. And when moral and cultural Christianity collides with moral and cultural Islam, or moral and cultural Confucianism, or cultural authoritarianism, I think then perhaps we're on the same page about that might be a way of countering it.
Yes.
But on the personal level, yes, I choose to believe in God. And I think there we might say, let's agree to disagree.
I didn't hear that.
She's saying, let's agree to disagree on the details. I mean,
it's more than just details. I mean, okay. I want to say two different things. Let's take the moral thing first. Islam is a nasty religion. I think we agree about that. But Christianity is not all that nice either. And when you think about Christianity, Christianity is obsessed with sin. St. Augustine said that we all inherit the sin of Adam. Well, of course he didn't exist, but so we inherit original sin. Original sin came down in the semen. Jesus was not conceived with semen, that's why he's clear of sin. His mother Mary had to be clear of sin as well, so she had to have an immaculate conception. This is all obvious nonsense. This is all theological bullshit. And the idea that humanity is born in sin and has to be cured of sin by Jesus being crucified, Jesus being punished for all our sins. And that is a morally very unpleasant idea. I'm sure you must agree about that.
I find that Christianity is actually obsessed with love, and that the figure, the teachings of the teaching of Christ, as I see it, and again, I'm a brand new Christian, but what I'm finding out, which is the opposite of growing up as a Muslim, the message of Islam, but the message of Christianity I get is that it's a message of love, it's a message of redemption, and it's a story of renewal and rebirth. And so Jesus dying and rising again, for me, symbolizes that story. And in a small way, I felt like I had died and I was reborn. And that story of redemption and rebirth, I think makes Christianity actually a very, very powerful story for the human condition and human existence, and the pain of suffering, but also our internal, the recognition of what you call sin, but perhaps the character defects, that both good and evil are there, but that both good and evil are in us. I think those teachings in Christianity are far more powerful and have led to, I think, the flourishing of Western civilization, compared to, say, growing up as a Muslim, when I was taught that really the only way for you to be faithful is to fear, naked fear, and to have these sets of obligations which you basically obey. And that was very much about power, it was centered around hellfire and all of these other things. And so Christianity, as I experience, I'll give you an example. When I was an atheist and I was going all over both the United States and all over Europe, mocking Christians, making fun of them, making fun of faith, as you're doing now, dear Richard. I was walking with 6 to 7 men at any given time, protecting me, armed, from things that I said that were offensive to Muslims, or Muslims thought were offensive to them. Christians were writing me letters saying, you know, we're going to pray for you, you're misguided. And I think that alone defines for me the distinction between Christianity in general, mainstream Christianity, and mainstream Islam.
Well, I must say, I've never met a vicar that I didn't like. I mean, they're always very, very nice people.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the stuff they believe is obvious nonsense. And you have to take the whole package, because, I mean, you talked about Jesus rising from the dead. You don't believe Jesus rose from the dead, surely?
I choose to believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
You choose to believe it?
Yes, and that is a matter of choice. And it's a matter, I think it has to go back to, is there something or is there nothing? And I think you start with, there is nothing. And yes, for years I agreed with you, there's nothing. But if you come round to the idea that there might be something much more powerful than we are, something that caused everything else, then something like Jesus rising out of the dead, or these other miracles, Jesus being born out of a virgin, for that higher power is not a big deal. But again, it's a matter of choice, and it is just different planes of perception. And I think here, on this plane of perception, having been a former atheist, I don't think this is something we're going to resolve tonight or agree on right now.
Well,
and so that is where I think it's perhaps more interesting, even if you choose not to believe, to say, let's at least talk about the value of Christianity for today. I look at these universities, the most illustrious universities of the West, and you've all shared with me images of young women draped in keffirs, the symbol of Hamas, performing the Muslim prayer. And tell me if those kids are not morally and utterly lost. And Queers for Palestine. So while you and I and Steven Pinker and all of those wonderful people were locked up in our ivory towers, let's ask ourselves what was happening on the ground, because in the last 6 decades, we pretty much demonized Christianity and the teachings of Christianity out of the public space, out of school, out of universities. And a vacuum occurred, and that vacuum is now being filled, as G.K. Chesterton said, not because people have come to reason, but because now they'll believe in anything. And there are very awful forces today out there that are claiming the hearts and minds and souls of these young students. And when you say there is nothing, you offer them nothing.
We're getting into the bigger political, cultural question. I just feel it's worth pressing one more time on this. What you said, agree to disagree, and I understand, having read Richard's letter to you, that literal belief is the bit that he can't get past. Are you saying that you don't literally believe those things? You talked about planes of reality. Is it that you see a beauty in those things and choose to suspend your rational judgment, or do you literally believe them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something subjective, and there's a choice. There are things that you see and perceive that a different person cannot perceive. Art, music. In fact, I think you do enjoy a great deal of Christian art and music. I will look at a painting by Pollock, and I will think my 6-year-old must have spilled all the paint on the canvas and run around. And people are crazy enough to pay millions of dollars and hang it on walls. But I've actually seen people be moved to tears staring at a Pollock. That is a plane of perception that is real, but it's also very, very difficult to measure. And it's the same the way you're moved by certain pieces of music. So the fact that I have faith, and I choose to have faith because of what I've experienced, is just as real for me as it is for the millions of people who believe. But for me, what is even more real is it's the story itself and the wisdom in that story, the morality that has come out, that has evolved out of that story, the internal debates of millennia long and everything that we inherited from it. It's just too casual to cast that aside. And when we've done it, I think we have caused ourselves a great deal of damage.
Richard, having heard that story, that moving story from Ayan of clearly how her conversion has helped her, and also she's explained in beautiful words the mode in which she believes it, do you still say you are not a Christian?
No, not at all. I came here prepared to persuade you, Ayan, you're not a Christian. I think you are a Christian, and I think Christianity is nonsense. You have to be. I mean, you appear to be a theist. You appear to believe in some kind of higher power. Now, I think that the hypothesis of theism is the most exciting scientific hypothesis that could possibly hold. And the idea that the universe was actually created by a supernatural intelligence is a dramatic, important idea. If it were true, it would completely change everything we know. We'd be living in a totally different universe. Now, that's a big thing. I'm sorry, but it's bigger than personal comfort and nice stories and things. The idea that the universe has lurking beneath it an intelligence, a supernatural intelligence that invented the laws of physics, that invented mathematics. And that is a stupendous idea, if it's true. And to me, that simply dwarfs all talk of nobility and morality and and comfort and that sort of thing.
So would you have preferred for your erstwhile new atheist colleague, Ayan, not to have converted? Having heard her story, would you rather...
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying that religious belief is bigger than what gives you comfort. Or it's bigger than morality, it's bigger than what gives you comfort, it's bigger than what gives you a bulwark against Islam. It's something huge, it's something terrific, and it's false.
Are you not moved at all to, she mentioned planes of reality. Is it for you entirely black and white, whether those kind of stories are true or not? It feels like Ayan is saying that she chooses to believe them because she accesses some kind of greater truth via them and is less interested in the details. You're not softened at all on that?
Well, I'm softened by a personal story, and I'm softened by beautiful music. I mean, I'm softened by St. Matthew Passion, and not just the music itself, but the story behind it. It's a very moving story, and I'm moved by it in the same way as I'm moved by great fiction. It is fiction, and one of course can be moved by fiction. I think Ayan has described me as the most Christian person she knows, and
yes.
And that may be true in certain senses, in a cultural sense, and when you say Christianity is a religion of love, Jesus, I think, was a very, very great character, a very loving character. The bad things about Christianity actually stem mostly from what came afterwards, St. Paul and the other Christian apologists who came after him.
So you cannot allow the possibility that Ayan has access to truth that you yourself have not seen?
It is a scientific hypothesis that there is a supernatural creator. And I don't see how you can get to that from feelings of personal comfort or feelings of political necessity. You have to get to that from thinking.
And that brings us to consciousness. So first of all, the hypothesis itself, which even if you don't allow for set religion aside, the hypothesis of where did all this come from and how did it begin, again, there is no consensus on that. There is no consensus on what consciousness is and what all that entails. But I think that it is, on an academic level, very interesting and very rewarding to look into and explore all of these different things separately on an academic level. On a non-academic level, I think that it's very useful now. I hate to go back to utility, but to have all of these things connected, where as human beings, we are material, yes, but we also are more than material. We have a sense of consciousness and we have a range of needs. And some of these needs, reason can answer and pure science can answer. But some of these needs cannot be answered by that. And I think faith in a higher power, in God, and in the story that makes sense of it all, gives it meaning, is very, very important for human beings. And the danger lies in trying to conflate these different planes and then casting aside as useful. It is false, it's useful, it's useless, it's unnecessary. And now we have, the range of human suffering where, as an atheist, you don't really offer an answer, you don't offer a prescription for this is this is a way of life, this is the path to happiness, this is how you can deal with the challenges of existence. And atheism is an attitude. It basically says, as of now, there is no evidence to show that God exists or that a higher power exists, full stop. And you figure the rest of it out. And it's very, very difficult to figure the rest of it out starting from scratch. And I think faith then gives meaning and purpose. And yes, if you're afraid of the dark, and if you're afraid of whatever it is that's causing you anxiety, or whatever is causing you self-doubt, relationships between other human beings, I think Christianity does offer a recipe, and perhaps in my view, the best recipe for not only how to live with yourself and connect to the universe, but also how to connect with fellow human beings and then bring about a civilization like this one.
Suppose it were true that atheism doesn't offer anything. Suppose it doesn't offer anything. So what? Why should it offer anything? Why should the universe offer you anything?
But what is the scientific explanation for you being moved to tears by Sir Matthew's passion?
Well, it's neurology. Let me ask Ayaan.
I think the question you ask now is very interesting. Why should atheism offer you anything? There is no reason why atheism should offer anything, but something else. Faith offers something valuable and tangible and great.
Yes,
so why should atheism mock that and knock it down?
No,
is
I
it
don't
not
want to mock
possible
it.
to have this coexistence where there is a place for reason and there is a place for faith and for subjectivity? Just like we agree to have a separation between religion and politics, I think it is absolutely possible to have, and Christianity allows for that, a separation of science and the material world, the temporal world, versus the world of faith. And these things, when they complement each other, I think lead to a much more powerful outcome than when you. Again, I find the differences between us a little cosmetic and a little artificial, because there are so many things I agree with that you are saying. It's just that the attitude that atheists take, that if you do not see the world the way they see it, and if you don't live according to reason, you must be an idiot. You must be unintelligent. You must be stupid.
No.
I think that is the bit that just smacks of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, let's not go there. I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
What I do want to say is this: faith offers you something. Obviously, that's very, very, very clear, but it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make the existence claims of Christianity true. There is a difference from saying that being in a certain psychological place is consoling and comforting and offers you a meaning of life and gives you a purpose in life. All those things which are wonderful, and I have them too. They're a bit different, but I too have a purpose in life. I have a meaning in life. But just simply because something gives you a meaning and a purpose in life, it doesn't make the existential claims true. And Christianity, like any other religion, makes claims about the world, about the universe, which are either true or not true. And I may be wrong and you may be right. They may be true. But the mere fact that they're comforting doesn't make them true. That's an important point.
But I agree with you on that point. The mere fact that they are comforting doesn't make them true. But the hypothesis that there is something rather than nothing is something you can't disprove as much as I can't prove materially that
Yes.
Jesus was born out of a virgin. So
Yes.
I think it's some of these areas where I think it's a very, very important debate that occurred, but 200
I
years
agree.
ago.
We can have that debate, and
Yeah.
that's an important debate, and that's the one I would like to have, rather than the one that's comforting. I mean, for example, I would like to know whether you think that we survive our bodily death when our brain dies. When I asked you that when we had dinner together, and you said no, have you changed your mind about that?
I'm sorry, please repeat. What have I changed my mind
Okay,
about?
about life after death, about surviving.
Do we survive our bodily
I
existence?
said, do you think we survive our own death? And you said no.
I said yes. Bodily, no. I do not. I don't survive death. I don't
No.
think you will survive death. I said that when Bertrand Russell said, "When we die, we shall rot," that
Yes.
that is true. But then, what happens to the soul, consciousness, etc.? That again, I don't know.
So you
can't-
think there is a soul that survives death?
Well, there is something that, again, like I said, I did feel a connection, and that it wasn't a bodily connection, it was a connection through consciousness and mind. And if that's going to outlast me or not, I don't know. I don't know about that. But Richard, I do know where you stand on this debate. And
So-
that is,
We could spend the next
Okay,
half hour
okay.
going through
Yes.
different theological points and seeing whether Ayan agrees with them or not. But there is this bigger cultural, societal impact point that
Yes.
you've really been in the middle of, Richard. You came out as a cultural Christian, or
Well,
at
I
least
didn't. I mean, I've been a cultural Christian all along, and I've never said anything else.
there was a lot of social media excitement recently that you had decided,
Yeah.
or you had confirmed that you were a cultural Christian. This is, I suppose, the political Christianity point that Ayan has also been making. If you accept that there is utility to faith at an individual level and at a societal level, how do you feel about what you have done and your fellow new atheists for the past few decades in so enthusiastically dismantling it?
I am so much more wedded to the importance of truth that I don't regret anything.
yeah.
I do think that if, for example, in Africa, there are missionaries, Christian missionaries and Muslim missionaries fighting for people's loyalty, and I'm on Team Christianity where that's concerned. And so politically, if you have to have a religion,
Will you
I think-
explain that to us a little bit more?
if you have
what
to
is-
have, I don't believe you have to have a religion. I think it's patronizing to suggest that people do need a religion. But if they do need a religion, then I'd rather it was Christianity than anything else.
So the dream world, according to Dawkins, would be nobody having a religion, and
Yes.
then in second place Christianity, and then
Yes.
Islam comes last.
Yes.
Okay.
You said
I think that's fantastic. And I also want to say, you, you don't have to go as far as Africa to see this confrontation between Team Christianity and Team Islam, and Team Christianity versus Team Wokeism. It's right here. There is a great deal of Islamic missionary work that has been very successful in Britain and in the US and in other parts of Europe. And I think Team Christianity or Team Christian is less confident here in the world of Christian civilization than, say, in Africa. And I want to go one step further and call upon Team Christianity to counter this message, because it's a very powerful message. And even if you and I disagree on whether, there is God and whether there is creation, I respect your view, I know you respect mine. But
Are you inviting Richard Dawkins to join Team Christianity?
Richard Dawkins is on Team Christianity.
Do you accept that, Richard Dawkins? Are you on Team Christianity?
But
If it's a choice.
Richard Dawkins just said that, but I think, and I really mean this in a serious way, I look at those young people in their 20s, in their teens, in their 30s, and right now they're being offered these messages of moral frameworks that they're embracing that are cultish, that are based on fear, that are nihilistic, and that are dead end. And so if you say you're on Team Christianity, then I would encourage those who are so inclined as to advance Christianity not to worry about Africa, but to start it here. Stand up to those people in Columbia and Harvard and Penn U.
What's the problem? What are you against here?
The young people have been susceptible to other ideologies that are
but what
far
other
inferior.
ideologies? What are we speaking of there?
Well, there are mosques and Islamic centers that have convinced young people here in America and in Britain and elsewhere that Christianity is dead, has nothing to offer, that Western civilization is a moral vacuum, and that they're here to fill it. And to my astonishment, it seems as if they're making an impact. Look at all these so-called pro-Palestine protests, which are not really pro-Palestine. These are, in my view, clearly, in many ways, they're adopting the religious frameworks offered by Islamists. And what I see is not what you saw in the 1960s. That's a different story. What you're seeing now is a moral vacuum that is being filled, a moral vacuum left untended by
And what is your
Christians.
answer to that? Are you hoping for some kind of Christian revival then? Are you now, having been a famous new atheist, will you now be a Christian evangelist?
I think, I don't know if you should put it that way. The way I would like to put it is, you have this amazing civilization, you have these amazing societies, and it is pretty frightening to see that the best and the brightest are converting to the mind virus of wokeism and the mind virus of Islamism, and that as atheists, no one even seems to have woken up to the idea. There is a condemnation of wokeism, which you do, which you condemn the woke and the mind virus of the woke, you condemn radical Islam. But I think, what do we then have to offer to these young people who are seeking something?
Rational secular humanism. Enlightenment values.
So do you share Ayan's diagnosis, the mind virus of wokeism, as she puts it, of
yes.
Islamism's return to
Yes.
parts of the West? And Enlightenment humanism doesn't seem to have resisted that advance very successfully.
Well, let's press it harder then.
Rational secular humanism is itself an outcome of Christianity. And
Well,
I think
I don't buy that.
it starts with the admission that rational secular humanism, the Enlightenment was able to take place within that Christian context, and it is a product of Christian civilization. It didn't happen in China, it didn't happen in the Middle East, it didn't happen anywhere else. It happened in these disputes between Christians. And I think part of that story and that whole history is one that needs to be celebrated and told and given to these young minds. And I think where you have a vacuum, something is going to fill it. And aside from the personal rewards that I reap from Christianity and that you reap from Christianity. I think there is the societal and the civilizational context where this thing is going through the cracks, and without a counter message, a spiritual counter message, I think we're in very, very bad and very, very serious trouble.
It may be true historically that rational secular humanism grew out of Christianity in the sense that historically that's where it came from. But you could say it's a reaction against Christianity rather than being in concert with Christianity.
But even as a reaction against Christianity, the advances that we have made are rooted in that story. And my objection to throwing the baby out with the bathwater is that if you create this disconnect so that young people they haven't been told of those debates, they're reading works that tell them that everything that the white male Christian left behind is exploitative, it's destructive, it has to be replaced with something else, it's settler, colonial, whatever. It's being cut off from the roots of that civilization. And I think part of the reason why that vacuum came about and it was possible was because of this casting aside of Christianity and this attitude within atheism that if you say reason, everybody will suddenly start becoming reasonable and think reasonably. And in that sense, that's been a mistake. G.K. Chesterton was right.
So do you regret having been part of the new atheism movement, having preached atheism from that pulpit?
I do regret doing that. And I want to say that when I realized the damage that I was doing, and I was doing a great deal of damage by equating Islam with Christianity. First of all, it is false. We were talking about truth and falsehood, and not all religions are the same. Religions are different because they come out of different cultures and grow out of different contexts. So Christianity is not the same as Islam, and I'm guilty of having said, well, all faiths, all perceptions of God are the same and they're equally damaging. So I come back from that, and I also have come to regret the damage that I've done, and I want to make my friends like Richard and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and all the others, I want you to see what I see. And what I see is where you have a moral vacuum, something is going to fill it. I want you to see that the teachings of Christianity, just like you said, if there is a competition between Team Christian and Team Islam, you would be on Team Christian. That what you value in Christianity is something that really is absolutely necessary to pass on to the next generation. And we have failed the next generation by taking away from them that moral framework and telling them it's nonsense and false, but also not protecting them then from the external forces that come in for their hearts, their minds, and their souls.
I think you're wrong to say. I think that you're wrong to differentiate Christianity from Islam in that sense. I mean, they all these Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they have the same holy book. They believe in hell. They believe in a dictatorial God. They believe in so much that's similar. The problem with Islam is that it's 700 years out of date, and Christianity has moved on. Thank goodness, and mainly because most Christians don't actually believe it anymore. I mean, they don't take it seriously. The problem with Islam is that they take it seriously. They believe in their religion. They actually will fight to the death for their religion in the way that Crusaders used to. And thank goodness they no longer do. Christianity has grown out of that.
But how do you respond to Ayan's charge there? It feels like quite a grave charge that atheism movement, that dismantling, has left a whole generation inadequately equipped to deal with the forces that are coming at them, and that's what she's saying.
We have secular humanism, we have rationality, we have moral philosophy. Moral philosophy is how we decide which bits of Christianity we like and which bits we don't, which bits of the Bible we take as being moral and which ones we don't. We cherry pick. And the basis for our cherry picking is modern, secular, moral philosophy, which is a well-established philosophical discipline, and it's on that basis that we decide what is moral and what is not. We decide in favor of feminism, of all the things that we value today, which do not come from Christianity. They come in spite of Christianity, in spite of all religions.
So what is your diagnosis for why that has come about? Why so many people do seem to be so lost during this secular age? If it's not the fault of receding religion, why has it
Well,
happened?
I'm not quite sure what we're talking about when we say this moral vacuum. I mean, we're talking about wokeism, are we?
But first, I really do want to object, Freddie, to Richard, the statement you made about the holy books of Christianity and Islam being the same is absolutely untrue. And in fact, maybe a follow-up to this discussion would be to actually read these books to see what's in them and how different they are. And another mega difference is the characters of Jesus and the characters of Muhammad are absolutely radically different.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
yes.
but that is why the holy books are not the same. The
Yeah.
story is absolutely not the same. They are different. And yes, each one of them makes a claim to being an Abrahamic religion. And there I do have to do a little bit of reading up on Abraham. I have to do a little bit of reading on the Old Testament. But as far as I can tell now, from where I am in the New Testament, it couldn't be more different from the Quran.
Well, okay. I've done a lot of reading up of it. The Old Testament is a very, very nasty book indeed. And the New Testament, on the face of it, is better. But the aspect of it which I mentioned before, the idea of God couldn't think of a better way to forgive the sins of humanity than to have his son crucified. That is a disgusting idea.
God gave us free will. God gave us free will. But again, I don't want us to go back to where we have agreed, to disagree. But in terms of, you asked, what do you mean by a moral vacuum? And what can we fill that moral vacuum with? The conception or the perception of the difference between right and wrong is, I think, something human beings have been trying to answer for millennia. And we have different human beings and different categories of human beings have reached different answers. And I think that if you take the history and the story of the moral story of this civilization, if you say, well, it's useless, let's mock it, let's cast it aside, what emerges is a generation of young people growing up who haven't been, provided with their Christian or their Judeo-Christian moral framework, and they also, for some reason, haven't been given what you are saying you're offering now, which is a moral humanism, or I haven't seen any kind of organized, in the way religions are organized, temples of reason and people dedicated to delivering a message of morality to young people. What you
Do you
have
accept
then
that, Richard? Just to
Well, in that case, if that were true, then we need to work harder. But we don't. What we don't need is to saddle our morality with a lot of supernatural nonsense.
Well, what I think the assumption was that universities and schools would provide that, and that universities and schools, again, separated from their Christian underpinnings, started to say, we are neutral grounds, and we are going to adopt a moral neutrality towards religion and faith. And there, exactly, that's where the vacuum emerged. Young people looking for moral direction, not getting it from their own civilization, and other forces coming in and filling that out. And that is the crisis that you are witnessing now. And I think it is I'm not evangelizing, I'm not imposing a new or an old form of morality, but I'm saying that we are having a very, very serious moral crisis. And I hope that this is just a fast conversation, but for those of us, I am coming out and saying, when I was advancing atheism and saying that Christianity is nonsense and it is just as nonsensical and as dangerous as Islam, I was absolutely wrong, and I contributed to this moral vacuum. And I stepped back.
Christianity, I mean, the largest Christian church at the moment is the Roman Catholic Church. And they are the people who've got the organization going. They've got the whole of South America. They've got an enormous number of people. And and they stand for total opposition to abortion, contraception. This is not a good organization for morality.
I think the challenge to you is, if you say the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or any of the other Christian churches are either, in terms of your words, either nonsensical or immoral or useless, or regardless of however you characterize them, if you don't have an alternative, and I think from at least the last 5 or so decades, we see that no alternative has been established. Again, the assumption was reason and enlightenment and humanism is simply going to emerge from education. The higher your level of education, the more reasonable you are. Now, what we see on display in our universities is the very opposite. That is a moral crisis.
Do you accept that?
Well, you seem to be saying that the organization isn't there. I mean, we need a church of humanism or something like that. I've never been in favor of that kind of thing, but
do you accept the observation that Ayaan is making? Do you think that's true, that having expected enlightened humanism to take the space if religion receded, that didn't happen?
I was never that optimistic. I mean, I never thought we were going to have a sort of brave new world of enlightened humanism. I was just interested in the truth, and the idea that somehow we were on a mission to found a new church or something like that we just never were.
So you didn't think about what would happen afterwards?
No, I mean, I can't speak for my colleagues, but for as far as I was concerned, what I was interested in is what is true, and I believe that all religions are false, and I'm interested in what is scientifically true.
We have a short amount of time left, and before we conclude, I feel we should touch on this question of Islam, because it actually seems, I think most people watching will be surprised by some of the language and the intensity of your agreement on this issue. You described it as a nasty religion. That's strong terms. What do you mean by that?
I don't mean that individuals are nasty. I mean that the ideas of things like the penalty for apostasy is death. I mean, what kind of a religion is it that has to penalize people who leave it by killing them?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a revolting idea. And
Are you, like Ayaan, are you anxious by the protests? Do you watch what's happening in the news with anxiety?
Well,
in that respect, she seemed to be saying earlier that Islamist ideas are growing.
I wasn't aware of that. I mean, the protests that are going on in American university at the moment look to me more like anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism.
And the vector for this virulent anti-Semitism is Islam. It's radical Islam. On every university, There is a Muslim Student Association. There are Islamic centers, there are mosques, there are websites, and they propagate, and sometimes in the most sinister ways, their faith and their antipathies, and the antipathy that radical Islamists hold against Jews have had, like, they're running amok in our universities and our schools. So if from one day to the next we wake up, the 7th of October last year, that horrible event happened where 1,200 Israelis were killed, many of them young people, many of them actually on the left, in kibbutzim, and many, many women raped and people mutilated. And you would think that in making that moral reckoning, that students here or anywhere, even fellow Muslims have said, this is absolutely heinous and it has to be condemned all the way. That is not what we are seeing. What we are seeing is the investment that radical Muslims made here on our soil, those young people completely brainwashed into coming out and blaming the victim, draping themselves in kafirs, shouting genocidal slogans and chants on our campuses, and thinking that they are replicating 1968 and see themselves as anti-war patrons. There is something that is going on. There is the mind virus of wokeism. There is the mind virus of radical Islam. And atheism is not the answer. I cannot go with all conscience to these young people and say there is nothing to believe in. Because the more we say there is nothing to believe in, there is nothing, then someone else comes and fills that nothing with something. And I don't like what I'm seeing.
Are you anxious? I mean, some of the language you've used this evening, I'm not sure if you said clash of civilizations, but it was moving in that direction, will be anxious-making to people. I mean, you are now a Christian. Are you really hoping to go back to the days where Christians take up intellectual arms against Muslims and we have a kind of civilizational conflict? It will be very anxious-making to people to hear that, perhaps.
I'm not going there. I'm going to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And you look at some of those frat students, and please just take a look at how they responded. Where there is an existing faith that is strong, it is very difficult for all of these other mind viruses to encroach upon and take over. That is as far as I'm going. I'm not saying let's start the crusades again. I'm just saying let's stand for what we have. Let's embrace it and let's defend it. And to defend it, you have to have a counter message. There is a great deal of activism knocking on young people's doors, telling them, do you want to know the difference between right and wrong? Do you want to know the difference between truth and false? And I don't see any counter-activism coming from humanists or coming from atheists. I see you and my fellow friends just as bewildered as anyone else when you look at this. So the people who are in charge of universities, people who are in charge of educating and developing young minds are looking on and thinking, what the heck is going on here? And that is not the right attitude. And it never has been the right attitude. There's a great deal of denial. Yes, there's a clash of civilization. And this clash of civilizations has been going on at least since 1989. And the attitude of Western leaders, political leaders, academic leaders, media leaders, has been to hide in denial. It's been to deny it. And the more you deny it, the more those adversaries who are clashing with us benefit from it. And right now, I don't think atheist humanism is offering any answers. I challenge you to come up with an elaborate message to fight these people.
What is your message to your Muslim or formerly Muslim followers? I mean, you have many, many people who see you as a beacon of someone who has left their Islamic faith behind and has found success and flourished in a secular Western society. What do you say to them now that...
So again, there are a billion and some Muslims, and there are Muslims who are peace-loving, who hate the Islamists, who hate the message of hatred and blowing people up and closing the minds and threatening people that if you leave Islam, you're going to be killed, which is absolutely revolting. So right now, I have more genuine Muslim friends than I ever had before, because the same individuals who reject, they still identify as Muslim, but they reject the idea of forcing faith on other people. And so a lot of them, my Muslim friends, are scratching their heads and wondering why Western civilization is committing suicide, why they're allowing this, in the name of freedoms, in the name of freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of religion. We have allowed a cult of power, Islamism, a political totalitarian ideology, to seed itself here, deepen and broaden and grow, and we have nothing in return to say. And it's a cult that wants to destroy the very freedoms that it uses to advance its agenda.
So what is your invitation to your Muslim or formerly Muslim followers? Is it become a Christian?
I'm not telling people to become Christian. All I have done is explain why I have become a Christian. I'm not saying to fail. I did say at one point in 2010, leave, if you're a good person, leave Islam, and told the Catholic Church, why don't you win hearts and minds that way? That is not what I am saying today. But I am saying to those fellow Muslims, I'm in a club with the Clarity Conference. It's Muslim reformers, ex-Muslims, people with a background like mine. And what we do is, if nothing else, just make you aware, if the world is ruled according to Sharia, if the people who are advancing this cult get what they want, we are going to see women caged up. We are going to see beheadings. We are going to see civilization go down the drain. They've demonstrated it over and over again. Al-Qaeda has done it. ISIS has done it. Hamas is doing it today. I think that we need to come out of denial and see as plain as daylight, and as plain as they keep showing us all the time. If they prevail, this is what they're going to do. Ask the citizens of Iran, ask the citizens of Saudi Arabia, ask Mali, Nigeria, under Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. That is what when they win, they are going to subject us to the same barbaric and heinous crimes that they subject to those whom they prevail over.
We are out of time. We could talk for many hours. I want to give the final word to you, Richard. What has this evening's conversation made you think?
We have two epidemiological theories here. We have a vicious mind virus. We agree about that, and we agree about your prognostications about that. The question is, do we combat it by vaccination with a mild form of the virus, or do we say no viruses at all and go for enlightened rationality?
You're a religious anti-vaxxer, that. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking both Richard Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi Ali.